the rain-soaked gallows. The torrential downpour struck the execution plaza like artillery fire, each droplet exploding against the metal grating with percussion that echoed off the surrounding industrial towers. Commander Jace Reeves knelt in the churning mud alongside 19 other condemned souls, electromagnetic shackles cutting into his wrists as freezing water cascaded down his stubbled jaw. 4 days ago, he'd been running humanitarian supplies through a consortium blockade to starving colonies in the Outer Rim. Now he faced death on this forsaken mining world for the crime of giving a damn about people the corporate overlords had written off as acceptable losses. "Beautiful morning for dying," muttered Korvac, a grizzled Danubian pirate chained beside him. The alien's scaled hide glistened with rainwater, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence against the storm. Jace spat muddy water from his lips, studying the executioner's platform that loomed ahead like a monument to bureaucratic cruelty. The local authorities had rounded up every smuggler, rebel, and black market trader they could find, deciding to make an example that would echo across 3 star systems. He'd survived worse odds in his military days, but he'd be lying if he claimed the timing didn't chafe. Above the crowd of onlookers, a covered viewing platform sheltered the planet's visiting dignitaries from the storm. Through the sheets of rain, Jace caught glimpses of elegant figures in ceremonial robes. Off-world diplomats here to witness Nexus Prime's commitment to corporate law and order. Among them stood a striking woman whose blue skin seemed to glow despite the gray morning. Her twin headtails draped gracefully over her shoulders, marked with intricate white patterns that identified her as someone of considerable importance in Altarian society. 2 smaller figures huddled beside her, seeking shelter from the relentless downpour. The herald stepped forward, his amplified voice cutting through the rain as he began reading the death sentences. Standard procedure: crimes against interplanetary commerce, violation of trade sanctions, conspiracy to undermine lawful authority. The usual corporate doublespeak that meant they were all about to die for helping people who needed help. Jace tested the give in his restraints. Not much. The guards knew their business and escape wasn't looking likely. He'd made peace with worse odds before, but something about dying in the mud on a planet that reeked of industrial lubricant and shattered dreams stuck in his craw. That's when the small voice cut through the rain in the herald's droning recitation. "Mama, that's him. That's the man who saved me." Every head in the plaza turned toward the sound. One of the blue-skinned children on the diplomatic platform was pointing directly at Jace, her small finger unwavering despite the storm. The herald stopped mid-sentence, confusion rippling through the crowd like a shockwave. Jace stared up at the child, memory flooding back. 4 days ago, before his arrest, he'd been in the residential district when a mining tunnel collapsed, trapping dozens of civilian workers. He'd pulled survivors from the rubble for hours, including a terrified, blue-skinned girl who'd been crying for her mother in accented standard. He'd carried her to safety and disappeared into the crowd before anyone could identify him. Apparently, someone had been watching. The elegant woman, the child's mother clearly, stepped forward to the platform's edge. Even from this distance, Jace could see the conflict playing across her refined features. Her composed diplomatic mask was cracking, revealing something far more human underneath. The rain continued to fall, but the plaza had gone deadly silent, except for the steady drumming of water on stone. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. "I invoke the diplomatic sanctuary clause under the Galactic Accords," the woman's voice rang across the plaza, cutting through the rain like a plasma blade. "This human is now under my personal protection as a material witness to crimes against civilian populations." Magistrate Dorvac, a thick-set reptilian whose scales glistened in the downpour, stepped forward with obvious displeasure. "Regent Kethvar, with respect, this is highly irregular. These prisoners have been lawfully sentenced under Nexus jurisdiction. And I am invoking my diplomatic prerogatives under interplanetary law," the blue-skinned woman, Regent Kethvar, replied, her chin raised defiantly. "Unless Nexus Prime wishes to face sanctions from the Diplomatic Council for violating treaty obligations." Jace watched this exchange with growing amazement. This woman was putting her entire career on the line for a complete stranger. He'd seen politicians throw their own families under transit haulers for less. Dorvac's reptilian features twisted with frustration. Very well. But understand, Regent, you assume full responsibility for this human's conduct. Any crimes he commits, any damage he causes falls upon your head. Are you prepared for such a burden? Regent Kethavar's gaze found Jace across the plaza. Something electric passed between them. Recognition, gratitude, and something deeper that made his pulse quicken despite the circumstances. I am, she said simply. The next hour blurred past in a haze of bureaucratic procedures. Jace found himself, released from shackles, processed through Nexus Prime's diplomatic channels and officially transferred to the Regent's custody. The other prisoners weren't so fortunate. Their executions proceeded as scheduled, a grim reminder of how close he'd come to joining them. By evening, Jace stood in the luxurious suite of Nexus Prime's diplomatic quarter, still struggling to process his reversal of fortune. The contrast couldn't have been starker. From a muddy execution ground to elegant accommodations with actual hot water and real food. The children are with their tutor, Regent Kethavar said, entering the main room. She'd changed from her formal, diplomatic robes into something more casual, a flowing garment that complemented her blue skin and revealed more of her graceful figure. We can speak freely now. About what exactly? Jace asked, accepting the glass of amber liquid she offered. It burned pleasantly going down. Expensive stuff. About the fact that you saved my daughter's life and I've just made you my legal responsibility. She settled onto the couch across from him, her movements fluid and hypnotic. In my culture, such debts are not taken lightly. And in mine, we don't usually expect payment for doing the right thing. Her head-tail shifted slightly. He was learning to read her body language. Amusement, he thought. How wonderfully direct, she said. Tell me, Jace Reeves. Yes, I know your name now. What drives a man to risk his life smuggling supplies to refugee colonies? Same thing that drives a diplomat to throw away her career for a stranger, I'd guess. He met her gaze steadily. Sometimes you can't live with yourself if you don't act. Fascinating. She leaned forward slightly and he caught a hint of some exotic perfume. On my world, such decisions are made through careful deliberation, weighing all possible outcomes. Humans seem to operate on pure instinct. Works for us most of the time. Jace found himself studying the elegant curve of her neck, the way her white markings seemed to glow in the soft lighting. There was something magnetic about her, an intelligence that matched her beauty, a strength that had just saved his life. Though I have to ask, he said carefully, what exactly does being your responsibility entail? That depends entirely on you. Her voice carried a note he couldn't quite identify. Nexus law requires that you remain in my custody until the diplomatic mission concludes. We'll be sharing these quarters for the next several weeks. The implications hung in the air, between them. Jace felt that familiar tightening in his chest, the same feeling he got before a dangerous run through hostile space. Except this danger was entirely different. I should warn you, he said. I'm not exactly used to diplomatic protocol. I might embarrass you. I doubt that. Her smile was enigmatic. Besides, I find human directness refreshing. My people spend so much time dancing around subjects that we sometimes forget what we're actually discussing. What are we discussing? She stood and moved to the window, gazing out at Nexus Prime's neon-lit skyline. Gratitude, responsibility, the strange circumstances that brought us together. She glanced back at him. The fact that I find myself inexplicably drawn to a species I've only read about in diplomatic briefings. The storm outside was finally beginning to ease, but inside their sanctuary, something else was just beginning to build. Consequences of compassion. The morning brought unwelcome complications in the form of Ambassador Quellen Valdros, whose silver skin gleamed with barely contained outrage as he swept into Regent Kethavar's quarters without invitation. 2 junior diplomats flanked him, their expressions carefully neutral despite the scandal brewing in the diplomatic quarter. Regent Zara. Quellen began without preamble, his forearms gesticulating dramatically. The diplomatic corps is gravely, concerned about your recent decisions. Jace, who'd been enjoying breakfast with Zara and her daughters, stood politely. I'll give you privacy to discuss. No, Zara said firmly, her hand touching his arm. You're part of this conversation. She fixed Quellen with a steady gaze. Ambassador, meet Commander Jace Reeves, the human who saved my daughter's life. Quellen's multiple eyes focused on Jace with obvious distaste. Yes, the smuggler. Regent, surely you understand how this appears to our hosts? Taking responsibility for a convicted criminal undermines our entire negotiating position. He's not a criminal, Little Nix piped up from her seat, her white markings flushing with indignation. He's a hero, Jace couldn't help but grin. The kid had spirit. Children should not speak during diplomatic discussions, Quellen said stiffly. On my world, children are encouraged to speak truth, Zara replied coolly. Perhaps that's why we're better negotiators. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a plasma torch. Jace decided to try a different approach. Ambassador, he said, stepping forward with his most diplomatic smile. I understand your concerns, but maybe there's an opportunity here. Your hosts respect strength and decisive action. Regent Kethvar demonstrated both by standing up for what's right. That's got to count for something in negotiations. Quellen's eyes swiveled to examine Jace more carefully. You presume to understand interplanetary diplomacy. I understand people, and I've spent enough time in hostile negotiations to know that showing backbone usually gets better results than rolling over. How refreshingly direct, Quellen said, though his tone suggested he found it anything but refreshing. Tell me, human, what exactly do you bring to this mission besides complications? Before Jace could answer, Zara's elder daughter Tessa spoke up from her reading tablet. He brings honesty, and he makes Mama smile more than she has in years. The silence that followed was deafening. Jace felt heat creeping up his neck while Zara's blue skin seemed to darken several shades. Children, she said carefully. Perhaps you should continue your studies in the other room. But Mama, we want to hear more about human customs, Nix protested. Jace was telling us about Earth families yesterday. Did you know human children actually choose their own mates when they grow up? Without parental contracts or diplomatic arrangements? Fascinating, Quellen said dryly. And what other primitive customs has our guest been sharing? Jace caught the insult but decided to let it slide. Just answering their questions about cultural differences. Kids are naturally curious. Indeed. Quellen turned back to Zara. Regent, I must insist that you reconsider this arrangement. The other delegates are questioning your judgment. Let them question, Zara said, rising gracefully. My judgment saved an innocent man and demonstrated our commitment to justice. If that troubles the other delegates, perhaps they should examine their own moral compass. After Quellen and his entourage left with considerably less dignity than they'd arrived with, Jace found himself alone with Zara while the girls attended their afternoon lessons. Sorry about that, he said. I didn't mean to cause problems for you. You didn't cause anything, Zara replied, moving closer to him. Quellen has been looking for reasons to undermine me since this mission began. He believes females shouldn't hold senior diplomatic positions. His loss. You're the most capable negotiator I've ever seen. You've seen me negotiate exactly once. Quality over quantity. Jace reached out to touch one of her headtails, marveling at its softness. These are incredible. Do they serve a function or are they purely aesthetic? Zara's breath caught slightly at his touch. They're sensitive. We use them to sense emotional states, environmental changes. When two of my people are close, they can actually intertwine and share sensations. Show me. She guided his hand along the length of her headtail, and he felt her shiver at the contact. Like this. But Jace, you should know. Touching another's headtails is considered very intimate among my people. How intimate? The kind of intimate that usually leads to... She trailed off, her eyes meeting his. To what? To the kind of connection that transcends species barriers. The air between them crackled with tension. Jace could see the rapid pulse at her throat, could feel the heat radiating from her skin. "Zara," he said softly, "I need you to know. What I feel for you isn't just gratitude or exotic attraction. You're remarkable. Brave, intelligent, compassionate. Any man would be lucky to—" She silenced him with a kiss that was far more urgent than he'd expected. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "The children won't return for 2 hours," she whispered against his lips. "Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything." What followed was a revelation for both of them. The differences in their physiology only seemed to enhance the experience, creating sensations neither had imagined possible. Zara's head-tails responded to his touch in ways that left her gasping with pleasure, while Jace discovered that her people's enhanced sensitivity made every caress electric. Afterward, they lay entwined on her bed, her head on his chest as his fingers traced lazy patterns along her head-tails. "That was—" she began. "Educational?" Jace suggested with a grin. "Revolutionary." She propped herself up to look at him. "I had no idea physical compatibility between our species would be so complete." "Neither did I, though I have to admit I was hoping." She laughed, the sound rich and satisfied. "Human optimism. It's infectious." "Is that a bad thing?" "On the contrary." She traced a finger along his jaw. "I'm beginning to think my people could learn a great deal from humans about passion, about taking risks for what matters. And I'm learning that alien diplomats are far more adventurous than their reputation suggests." "Only the best ones," Zara said with a smile that promised more adventures to come. Their private moment was shattered by an urgent chime from Zara's communicator. She checked the message and paled. "What is it?" Jace asked, immediately alert. "Captain Voss has been released from prison. He's demanding an audience." Jace felt ice form in his stomach. Captain Marcus Voss, his former partner who'd sold out their last humanitarian mission to corporate security, the man directly responsible for Jace's capture and near execution. "He can't touch you here," Zara said, reading his expression. "You're under diplomatic protection. You don't know Voss. He doesn't give up and he holds grudges forever." As if summoned by their conversation, another chime announced an incoming transmission. Zara accepted it reluctantly, and Voss's scarred face appeared on the holographic display. "Well, well," Voss said, his voice carrying its familiar sneer. "Jace Reeves. Still running away from your responsibilities, I see." "What do you want, Marcus?" Jace said, stepping into view. "Justice. You cost me 3 years in a corporate detention facility. I think it's time to settle accounts." "The only account that needs settling," Jace replied evenly, "is the one where you sold out refugee families for profit. Ancient history. I'm more interested in your current arrangement." Voss's gaze shifted to Zara and his smile turned predatory. "Regent Kethvar, isn't it? Tell me, does the Altarian Diplomatic Corps know about your little interspecies romance?" Zara stepped forward, her diplomatic training keeping her voice steady despite the threat. "Captain Voss, you have no jurisdiction here." "Maybe not, but I have friends who do. Friends who might be very interested to learn about certain compromising recordings from your quarters." Jace felt rage building in his chest. "You son of a— Voss waggled a finger. "Careful, Jace. Wouldn't want to cause more trouble for your diplomatic friend." The transmission ended, leaving them in tense silence. "He's bluffing," Jace said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is he?" Zara asked quietly. "Because if he has evidence of our relationship, if it becomes public knowledge—" She didn't need to finish. They both understood the implications. Her career would be destroyed, her children's futures compromised, and any hope of progressive change in interspecies relations would die with the scandal. "Then we don't give him the chance," Jace said firmly. "I'll turn myself in, claim you were deceived." "Absolutely not." Zara's head-tails flared with determination. "We face this together, or not at all." The next morning brought their answer, in the form of High Inquisitor Thane, whose arrival sent shockwaves through the diplomatic quarter. Unlike the pompous Quellen, Thane was a true power player, connected directly to the Altarian High Council and capable of ending careers with a word. As Jace watched the imposing figure stride toward their quarters, flanked by a full security detail, he realized their time had run out. The consequences of their compassion and their love were about to be tested in ways neither had imagined. "Whatever happens," Zara said, taking his hand as they prepared to face their fate, "I don't regret saving you. I don't regret any of it." "Neither do I," Jace replied, squeezing her fingers. "Whatever comes next, we'll handle it together." The future remained unwritten, but one thing was certain. Their love had already changed both their worlds forever.